Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a truly heart-wrenching case, one that unfolded in a seemingly ordinary home. Thousands of miles away from us, but with a darkness that, sadly, knows no borders. We're going to explore the story of Cadell Jeanson Raja, a young man whose fascination with the occult took a horrifying and irreversible turn. This is a narrative that delves into profound isolation, unsettling obsession, and the unimaginable tragedy that can result when the lines between reality and fantasy become dangerously blurred. To truly grasp this story, we need to journey to the southwestern tip of India, to a state known as Kerala. Imagine a land of lush, tropical beauty, famous for its serene backwaters, vibrant culture, and surprisingly high literacy rate. Within Kerala, our focus narrows to a town called Neyatinkara. It's a place where traditional life often dances with modern aspirations, a community where you might expect strong family bonds and a deep sense of belonging. Yet, it was in this very setting, within the walls of a seemingly respectable family home, that a chilling crime would shatter that fragile peace. In Neyatinkara lived the Raja family. On the surface, they presented a picture of everything one could hope for. The father, Dr. Raja, was a highly respected and retired history professor. His wife, Dr. Jean Padma, was a dedicated and practicing cardiologist. They were blessed with 2 children, a bright younger daughter named Caroline, who was eager to follow in her mother's esteemed medical footsteps, and their elder son, our central figure, Cadell Jeanson Raja. However, in stark contrast to his seemingly affable father, Cadell remained largely unknown in their bustling neighborhood. People knew the doctor had a son named Cadell, yes, but that was often the extent of their knowledge. They were completely unaware of his personality, his close friends, his whereabouts, or even his quiet hobbies. This was largely because, from a very young age, Cadell was an exceptionally quiet and reserved child. He genuinely preferred his own company, rarely socialized, and was simply not one for casual conversation. Even after years of living in the same vibrant community, most residents had only caught fleeting glimpses of him. He simply didn't like to leave the comforting confines of his home. In essence, his entire world existed almost exclusively within the 4 walls of his bedroom. This deeply withdrawn behavior wasn't confined to his home life. It unfortunately extended to his school as well. This, in turn, began to severely impact his academic performance. As a student, Cadell consistently struggled. His grades were poor, his exams rarely went well, and he often found himself at the very bottom of his class. Now, if you've been following the family dynamic, you might have already noticed a troubling pattern emerging. The rest of the Raja family were, by all accounts, highly intelligent and successful in their own chosen fields, whether academically or professionally. All of them, except Cadell. This stark disparity, this constant perceived failure, led to significant friction at home. His father reportedly would scold and pressure him relentlessly to study harder. And perhaps even more damagingly, frequently compared him to his seemingly brilliant younger sister. If you've ever been on the receiving end of that kind of comparison, that feeling of falling short, it doesn't feel good. Even if the comparison seems valid. For Cadell, already a loner, these relentless pressures and comparisons likely festered deep within him. He never shared these profound feelings, neither at home nor at school, where he, tragically, seemed to have no close friends. It appeared that Cadell was simply existing, merely breathing, with little genuine connection to the vibrant world around him. Amidst this backdrop of profound isolation and academic struggle, Cadell found his only solace in one thing: the vast, boundless world of the internet. He spent countless hours online, and this became his primary, if not sole, hobby. He seemed genuinely content in this digital realm, finally discovering something he truly enjoyed, even if it was just browse obscure websites and immersing himself in video games. However, this seemingly innocent digital exploration would, tragically, lead him down a dark and incredibly dangerous path. When he was just 14 years old, while surfing the internet, he stumbled upon a website dedicated to mysterious and, quite frankly, occult rituals. While many strange topics on the site might have caught his attention, one in particular became an absolute obsession: astral projection. For those unfamiliar, astral projection is the captivating yet controversial belief that one's soul or consciousness can actually separate from the physical body and travel to other dimensions or locations. This concept, this idea of transcending his physical form, deeply fascinated Cadell. He devoured every single article, watched every video, and gathered as much information as he possibly could about this esoteric practice. He then began to practice astral projection regularly. Allegedly, whenever Cadell performed this ritual or immersed himself in its practice, he would become completely oblivious to his real-world surroundings. He was utterly lost in this other realm, his physical body simply a vessel while his mind wandered. And each time he engaged in this peculiar practice, he reportedly experienced an intense rush of dopamine. A profound feeling of pleasure and reward that quickly became his anchor. It didn't take long for someone like Cadell, already desperately seeking escape and perhaps a sense of control or power, to become addicted to this ritual. Practicing astral projection quickly transitioned from a hobby to a consuming habit, then to an all-encompassing obsession. For days, sometimes even for weeks on end, he would remain locked away in his room, meticulously dedicating himself to these practices. He stopped going out altogether. His already small world began to shrink further and further, until it was just him and his rituals. This overwhelming obsession reached a critical point when, in 12th grade, he starkly informed his parents that he simply wouldn't study anymore. He wanted to pursue something different in his life. After significant arguments, he dropped out of school. An unthinkable act for many, but for Cadell, it was a necessary step to remain within the confines of his room and dedicate himself even more intensely to astral projection. Following his dropout, things, predictably, only worsened. He became even more isolated, even from his own parents. And his overall condition continued to deteriorate at an alarming rate. Seeing their son's heartbreaking downward spiral, Cadell's parents were, understandably, consumed with worry. They feared he would never amount to anything, that he would be forever unable to interact with people or hold down a job. They truly believed he was throwing his entire life away, especially after his decision to drop out of high school. Desperate, they decided on a drastic step. They would send him to Ukraine to study medicine, hoping a brand new environment and new people would somehow transform him. However, Cadell, as we know, had no genuine interest in medicine. His only real fascination remained his beloved astral projection. Despite this, his parents, through sheer perseverance, somehow convinced him to go. They were filled with fragile hope that their son was finally turning a corner, finding his path. But as we've learned, Cadell wasn't a strong student, and he certainly didn't want to be a doctor. After only a few months, he predictably dropped out and returned home. They then, with a renewed sense of effort, pushed him into engineering. His determined parents, however, refused to give up. But the same painful pattern repeated itself. He tried for a few months, only to drop out of engineering as well. After 2 such failed attempts at higher education, Cadell's parents were, like any parents would be, utterly stressed and deeply concerned. They felt he simply wasn't serious about his future, spending all his days playing games in his room. They were truly losing hope. Then, unexpectedly, Cadell announced a new interest. He was passionate about animation and wanted to study in Australia. Many parents, faced with such a history, might have simply dismissed this, urging him toward a more practical or stable career. But Cadell's parents, having witnessed his profound lack of interest in virtually anything else, saw this as a potential breakthrough, a genuine spark. They thought, perhaps, their son had finally found his true calling, his life's purpose. Filled with a renewed, albeit cautious, sense of hope, they happily sent him to Australia. Their joy then doubled when, just a few years later, Cadell called them with incredible news. He had secured a job with an Australian company, and even better, it was fully work from home. This meant he was coming back to India, not only with a degree, but also with a seemingly stable job. Cadell's parents were, quite frankly, overjoyed on cloud 9. It must have felt like a wonderful dream. Both their children were seemingly thriving. Their daughter was due to return from China with her medical degree in just a few months, and their son was coming home with a promising career. Having witnessed Cadell's profound struggles with anxiety and social interaction for so many painful years, they were immensely, deeply happy that his life finally appeared to be on track. But this newfound hope, this immense happiness, was tragically misplaced. The cold, harsh reality behind Cadell's return was far, far darker than they could ever have imagined. Once home, Cadell immediately retreated back to his room under the thin guise of work. Spending his entire day locked away from everyone. While his trusting family believed he was diligently working at his computer, he was In fact, deeply immersed in his chilling occult practices and rituals. His obsession with astral projection now intensified to a terrifying degree. He wasn't just performing rituals. He was delving into even more disturbing and arcane practices. It was becoming terrifyingly clear that Cadell was spiraling towards a breaking point, a moment of no return. And sadly, that point was not far off at all. Then came Wednesday, April 5th, 2017. On this fateful day, Cadell Jeanson Raja, still only 19 years old, made a chilling and calculated decision. He would murder his entire family. On that particular morning, Cadell's father and sister were out of the house on some errands. His mother and grandmother were the only ones home, left vulnerable. This, for Cadell, presented his grim opportunity. He reportedly told his trusting mother that he was working on a brand new video game and, with what must have been an unsettling calm, asked her to come and see it. Because Cadell so rarely showed interest in sharing anything with his parents, especially his work, his mother was likely touched, perhaps even a little excited and curious. Eager to see what her son had poured his energy into, she quietly followed him into his room. She sat down, likely with a loving expression, in front of the computer, patiently waiting for the game to start. Then, suddenly, she felt a sharp, excruciating pain at the back of her head. Moments later, her body slumped forward onto the keyboard. That intense, final pain was caused by Cadell, who had brutally struck his own mother, with an axe. He reportedly continued to strike her relentlessly until she stopped moving altogether. Cadell had, in a horrifying act, murdered his own mother. After brutally killing his mother, Cadell reportedly then calmly cleaned the blood in the room with fennel, a common household disinfectant used in many parts of India. He then, with an unnerving lack of emotion, dragged her lifeless body into the bathroom. What's particularly chilling about this entire ordeal is that he remained seemingly unfazed, completely calm, throughout this horrific act. Cadell then simply waited for his father and sister to return home. When they arrived, he even sat down and shared lunch with them, as if it were just another ordinary day. During lunch, he told his unsuspecting father that he wanted to show him something and, again, asked him to come to his room. His father, perhaps not overly enthusiastic but likely accustomed to his son's occasional requests, eventually agreed. Once in the room, Cadell allegedly murdered his father in the exact same brutal manner he had killed his mother just hours earlier. However, this time, he didn't even bother to clean the room. Perhaps driven by a terrifying urgency or simply a chilling indifference. He then called his younger sister, Caroline, into the room. And as soon as she entered, he reportedly attacked her savagely, without hesitation. Unlike his parents, Caroline, in a desperate struggle, didn't immediately succumb to the initial blow. To ensure her death, Cadell allegedly then took a machete and slashed her throat. Just like that, in a matter of a few horrifying hours, he had annihilated his entire immediate family. Now, a crucial, haunting question arises. With all this unspeakable violence occurring, how on earth did the grandmother, Lolita, hear nothing? She was, after all, in the house at the time. The chillingly simple explanation reported is that Cadell had been playing loud, blaring music throughout the house while committing these unspeakable acts. This deafening curtain of sound likely masked the screams and the gruesome thuds of the attacks, effectively preventing his blind and elderly grandmother, who was on the ground floor, from hearing anything amiss. Break time equals 3. Cadell's room was on an upper floor, further isolating the sounds, making his monstrous acts easier to conceal. After meticulously murdering his family, Cadell then, with a chilling presence of mind, attempted to establish a calculated alibi. That very same night, he reportedly ordered 5 plates of food from a nearby restaurant. Enough for himself and his unsuspecting grandmother, creating the false impression that the entire family was still present and enjoying a meal. After having dinner with his completely unaware grandmother, he simply went to his room and slept peacefully, as if nothing had happened, as if 3 lifeless bodies weren't lying in his bathroom. Allegedly, for the next 2 agonizing days, Cadell engaged in an even more profoundly disturbing act. He reportedly began to dismember the bodies of his very own family. During this unspeakable period, only Cadell and his blind grandmother remained in the house. However, there was also a housemaid who worked for the family, but she had been away, visiting her village on holiday. 2 days after the murders, the maid returned. As soon as she came back, she, quite naturally, asked Cadell about his parents and his sister. Cadell, without missing a beat, reportedly told her that his entire family had gone to Kanyakumari, a very popular tourist destination at the southern tip of India, explaining that his grandmother couldn't travel in her delicate condition. He further stated that they were visiting relatives there, and perhaps his grandmother might even join them later. The maid, having absolutely no reason to doubt him, believed his seemingly innocent story. This chilling deception continued for another 2 days. The maid would come to the house, diligently do her chores, clean, cook, and then leave, completely unaware of the gruesome reality hidden within the walls of that seemingly ordinary home. You might be wondering, with a growing sense of unease, why the maid didn't notice any foul smells or see anything suspicious, especially given the unspeakable acts that had transpired. The explanation, as chilling as it is simple, is that Cadell's room was on an upper floor, and he had strictly forbidden the maid, or anyone else for that matter, from ever going to his floor. He insisted on cleaning his own private space. Even his own parents were reportedly not allowed upstairs. Perhaps out of misguided respect for Cadell's desperate desire for privacy. So, the maid would simply clean the ground floor and leave, never venturing to the upper floor where the grim truth lay hidden. But then came April 9th. When the maid arrived for work, her heart must have sunk as she noticed that Lolita, the grandmother, was also missing. And Cadell, with that same unnerving calm, told her the very same story. His grandmother had also gone to join the others. This statement sends a shiver down one's spine because, chillingly, on that very day, Cadell had reportedly murdered his blind grandmother with the axe in her own room. He then, without remorse, placed her body in the bathroom there, stopwatch 2S. Now, Cadell, finally realizing the sheer impossibility of explaining the disappearance of 4 people, desperately devised a final, catastrophic plan. That night, he set his house on fire. His grim intention was to destroy all the damning evidence and claim that his entire family had tragically perished in the blaze. However, he reportedly gravely underestimated the speed at which fire could spread, especially in the heat of India. The fire quickly and ferociously engulfed the entire house, becoming uncontrollable. Seeing his desperate plan unravel before his very eyes, Cadell, in a panic, fled. It wasn't long before people noticed the raging fire, and around 11:30 p.m., the police quickly arrived to investigate. Given that Nayatinkara is reportedly not far from the residence of the Chief Minister of Kerala, the police force was on high alert, taking the situation incredibly seriously. After tirelessly extinguishing the blaze, the police cautiously entered the charred remains of the home and were met with a truly horrifying scene. Not only was the house utterly devastated, but they also discovered burnt bodies. Initially, they found what appeared to be 5 bodies, and neighbors sadly confirmed that 5 people indeed lived in that house. It must have seemed, at first, like a tragic accident. But further, more meticulous investigation revealed a bizarre and unsettling detail. One of the bodies was, in fact, a fake. It was a crude dummy, cleverly constructed from metal and clothes. It then became chillingly clear that one member was missing, Cadell Jeanson Raja. But where had he gone? After fleeing the burning house, Cadell spent 2 agonizing days on the run, desperately hiding throughout the city. But his escape was mercifully short-lived. Just 2 days later, police finally arrested him at the Trivandrum, formerly Trivandrum, railway station. Railway police reportedly identified him from wanted posters. And he was also behaving suspiciously, desperately trying to conceal his face. He was, thankfully, caught relatively easily. But Cadell's capture only led to even more questions, the most pressing and deeply unsettling being, why? Why would Cadell murder his entire family? What conceivable motive could drive a young man to commit such an unfathomable and heinous act? This is where the investigation takes an even darker and more perplexing turn, leaving many still searching for answers. Even now, the exact motive remains somewhat unclear, a chilling question mark hanging over this horrific case. During interrogation, Cadell's statements were reportedly inconsistent and deeply contradictory. He constantly changed his story, almost as if trying to mislead investigators at every turn. Initially, he told police a truly bizarre tale, that he killed his family to separate their spirits through an occult ritual, believing that their souls would then enter his body, making him somehow stronger. Unsurprisingly, the police found this explanation utterly incredible and highly unlikely. However, under further, more intense questioning, a different, more disturbing motive began to emerge. Cadell reportedly confessed to a deep-seated hatred for his family, particularly his father, who he felt treated him terribly due to his perceived lack of brilliance compared to the rest of his accomplished family. Police found this second explanation far more plausible, suggesting that all the talk of astral projection and rituals was merely a smokescreen, a way to obscure the true, resentful motive. The meticulously planned nature of the murders, including his chilling practice on that dummy, further supported this grim conclusion. While the motive of resentment towards his parents might, tragically, seem somewhat understandable in the context of extreme pressure, a far more disturbing and heartbreaking question lingered. Why his sister and grandmother? They reportedly didn't mock him or subject him to the same academic pressures. When police questioned Cadell about this, his reported answer was nothing short of utterly unsettling, revealing a truly warped mindset. He allegedly stated that if his parents were dead, his beloved sister and his frail grandmother would be alone and suffering in this world. His reasoning? He chillingly claimed he saw himself as nothing, unable to care for them. He then, with a chilling lack of empathy, claimed he killed them to spare them the pain and sorrow of being without his parents. A truly twisted, horrifying, and utterly depraved justification for mass murder. Following his trial, Cadell was eventually declared mentally ill. As a result, he was subsequently moved to a specialized mental health care center. One of the psychiatrists who treated him reportedly suggested that Cadell may have had underlying mental health issues since childhood. Untreated, these issues could have tragically worsened over time, ultimately leading to a complete and catastrophic breakdown and the horrific violence he inflicted upon his own family. However, it is crucial to remember that this diagnosis, while immensely important for understanding his state, doesn't entirely explain or, in any way, excuse his actions. Even while incarcerated, Cadell's behavior remained wildly erratic. He would suddenly become violently aggressive, attacking cellmates and chillingly claiming that a voice inside his head was constantly telling him to kill. His unpredictable and deeply violent nature made him a significant danger to others. A subsequent psychological analysis reportedly confirmed that Cadell suffers from schizophrenia. He is now, reportedly, held in solitary confinement. Isolated from everyone, one can only hope that, someday, he will truly confront the immense enormity of his horrific actions and feel a genuine sense of regret or guilt. Before we close this incredibly disturbing case, it's absolutely crucial to reflect on the issue of mental health. When tragic cases like this emerge, and mental illness is cited as a factor, it's very easy to fall into the trap of believing that mental illness inherently leads to violence. The narrative often shifts to, oh, because his mind wasn't well, he wasn't in the right headspace, that's why he committed these terrible crimes. But this is a dangerous and fundamentally untrue oversimplification. There are thousands, even millions, of people around the world suffering from various mental health disorders, from anxiety to depression, from schizophrenia to bipolar disorder. Yet the overwhelming majority of these individuals do not commit violent acts. How many cases have you truly heard where, for example, if 1 million people are diagnosed with schizophrenia, all 1 million go on to murder or harm others? That simply does not happen. Mental illness is a complex public health issue that requires understanding, empathy, and professional treatment, not condemnation or generalization. It's vital to differentiate between an illness and the individual's choices and accountability. Regardless of the presence of a mental health disorder, a perpetrator who commits such heinous crimes is, ultimately, a perpetrator of those crimes. The focus should always remain on the victims and the unfathomable loss they endured. And with that sobering thought, the tragic case of Cadell Jeanson Raja concludes here. If you enjoy watching these in-depth true crime documentaries, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Because that's exactly what I focus on here. And also, don't forget to check out my other content.